Stellar Blade fans can't stop winning because the game itself is unstoppable, even after coming under attack from many games journalists over its overall attractive aesthetic with a lot of beautiful characters, which seems to be going against the trend, at least in the Western video games development industry. And after coming under these attacks, it's still going strong with some of the same aesthetics it's being criticized for. Of course, we've come out with the ratings for this game, and it's rated mature and adult in Korea for nudity and violence, which is keeping up with some of the things that we have been seeing with the gameplay and the overall looks and countenances of the various characters that have been chosen, especially the female characters. So there's no manipulation or editing that's happening with this game. It's standing 10 toes down on what it developed and what it focused on. It even fired staff members that were trying to adjust the game and make it less graphic. So this developer Shift Up is really focused on delivering what the fans actually want, and it's surprising to see that from a Korean studio when just a few months ago people didn't even know video games were being developed in Korea. Now we have the biggest and most pre-ordered game for Sony PS5 coming from a Korean studio very few people heard about it. I think that is the shocking thing, is where we're seeing the pre-orders for this game are unstoppable. It's continuously growing. It's become the fastest selling PS5 game ever, and it's happening at a shocking time where we're inundated with character models and overall looks that are the opposite of what we're seeing with Stellar Blade. And I think this is showing such a dearth of beauty within the industry, where this game that just has a few pretty characters is getting so much attention because we just don't see that in the Western development space, with a lot of characters being uglified and defeminized and more masculinized. And I went over this in a previous video where that is just the modus operandi of a lot of developers. They feel like they're placating to the sensitivity of their audience, and we have the reasons why. Sometimes it comes down to their interactions with specific gender sensitive communities that feel insecure with overly feminine bodies. And I think that is the case with a lot of video games that are coming out, Starfield, like Fable, like Last of Us. All these games specifically said they altered the look of the female characters due to sensitivities to people that have different gender profiles who may feel insecure by the overall femininity of the characters in video games. And South Korea is not caring about that sensitivity, and they're going for the majority of the audience who are not sensitive to this. And I think that's the clear thing, that people are frustrated with Western developers, video game studios, where they're placating sensitivities of a very few, a minority that is insignificant in comparison to the majority of players that actually want to play a super feminized, beautiful character. And I think this game is showing the priority that should be given to these sort of games. And we have that complaint throughout the Twitter sphere and social media, where people are saying we're tired of looking at these ultra realistic characters that just don't look like characters we want to play as, who want to interact with. And we're getting this change in outside developers in the eastern side, like Japan, like South Korea. And I think that's the crux of the situation right now, and that is leading to the ultimate success of this game, where we're seeing so much attention towards it, so much people searching for this game, so much people looking at the gameplay trailers and just talking about this game because it's doing something that is the opposite of the trend. And I think the numbers are bearing fruit, where we're seeing success at a high rate for this game, where it wouldn't have brought up that much attention over a decade and a half ago, where 15 years ago this game was common. No one would really pay attention to it. Some people will play it, it will develop a cult fan base, but now it's becoming a large, massive success and growing a studio in South Korea, where this wouldn't have happened in the past. And I think that is the most amazing part of the story, where we're getting a whole sphere that is developing in these eastern countries that are taking up the mantle where Western developing studios have dropped the ball on it. I think that's happening in the video game industry. The things that were successful for a lot of video games have been neglected in favor of being sensitive to a small minority of gamers that usually just don't buy video games at all. That is the questionable thing about this situation, where you're placating a fan base that are so small that they may not even buy your games because they're just there to complain and not actually purchase the games they're complaining about. And I think we saw this with a lot of games that were released that placated these sensitivities, like Starfield, like Last of Us to a lesser extent, where it even match up to some of the sales figures of the first one, and the complaints were endlessly mocked for its deviance from the aesthetic beauty standard that people still have, but is ultimately ignored all throughout the entertainment industry. This is not only video games. I think this applies to specifically Hollywood, where it is losing the attention of the general audience around the world because it's so focused on this kind of ultra realistic, uglified look of characters that most people around the world are not used to and don't want to see. And I think that's why we're seeing other studios across the world pick up the slack. We have Bollywood in India, you have Japanese movies that are coming out that are dominating America, like Godzilla, and of course you have the South Korean market, whether it comes to the local dramas to overall movies, music, and art, where it's just taking over systematically because Hollywood is just not making quality content anymore up to the values that the whole world can recognize and applaud it. I think that is the biggest failure right there that we're seeing, and I think this is the video game version of that's happening with Stellar Blade, where they're developing things here that should have been developed in America but can't be developed anymore because everyone's too sensitive to certain outcomes and certain looks and overall standards of beauty. And I think that's what's making this game unstoppable and just always making sales numbers that we haven't seen before for the PS5. And I think it's going to continue on. It seems like that's the case, even though the ESRB rating hasn't fully come out. We have the rating of it in South Korea, and it's holding those standards. I think I'm fine with that, even though people were having a bit of trepidation because a Chinese company purchased a large amount of shares for the studio shift up. So people were expecting maybe there'll be censorship there, and maybe there will be censorship in the Chinese version, but hopefully in America we get the Korean version. If we don't get the Korean version, people will riot, and I think that is the thing that people are focusing on right now. But you tell me your thoughts on the situation. What do you think is going to happen with Shift Up and Stellar Blade? I think it's going to be one of the biggest PS5 selling games out there. Maybe not in history, but it's a high possibility that this is going to make a large amount of sales numbers, especially if the gameplay matches up to it. People are saying some of the gameplay elements are kind of like Elden Ring, which is shocking to me. I was expecting something more closely to Bayonetta or something like that, but a lot of comparisons to a lot of good game companies. So if it matches the gameplay with some of the aesthetic art and beauty, this is going to be the biggest hit for PS5 and maybe one of the biggest hits of the year. And I firmly expect that to happen with this game. This is what we all wanted from a game that is staying true to itself. It doesn't have to be about beauty in the sense, but it has to be about the truth and honesty of developing something that you want to develop without interference from a political or a progressive activist that needs to influence your mind. I want to see something from a true creator's vision, and this is obviously Shift Up's vision. And I think the same thing with Hogwarts Legacy. They kept to what they wanted to create. They didn't care about all the noise, and they stuck to their vision. And that's all I want from a video game developer. Ignore the politics. Do what you want to do and make something creative and beautiful. And I think that's what's happening with Stellar Blade. But you leave a comment, tell me what you think, like, share, subscribe. This is Wagner Knows Why. Catch you next time.